And we are back. After the beat is here, you have sent us a litany of questions. We've got a lot to get to here, so let us not waste any time. We went a little over. Let's get to question number one. Sink our teeth into these bad boys. Guys, when Jon Jones comes back, do you think he deserves to go straight back into the title picture, or do you think he should have to fight his way back into the light heavyweight/heavyweight title picture? I was talking to someone about this recently. Should the UFC be afraid of the message that it sends if Jon Jones walks into an either Daniel Cormier trilogy fight or even, perhaps bigger than that, Brock Lesnar fight after coming off now his second run-in with USADA? Are they in danger of doing that, or does it not matter? He's back, and who the hell cares? And
you are a comedian.
What?
Who cares?
All right.
Are you kidding me? Conor McGregor chucking furniture or whatever, furniture carriers at a bus.
Yeah.
They don't do nothing about it, and then you're going to worry about what kind of message it sends if Jon Jones comes back from what will be ultimately he'll have served his sentence. He can't come back until that's been finished, whatever that ends up being, and you're worried about that. I mean, yeah, it probably sends a bad message, but it'll send a great message to the box office. So who cares? And
you don't think that they are worried about the wrong message being sent out, right?
They're so used to wrong messages that I mean, I don't. I mean, for me, if you come back from a suspension that's related to your fighting, I don't think that you should come back and get in a title fight right away. I don't think that's for me. I don't know. I'm not saying that's the way the UFC would do it, but for me, I would say have another fight. Now, as far as Brock Lesnar, if they got him against Lesnar, great. I mean, it's a huge money fight. It's not a title fight, so I think that would be an awesome re-entry point. I would not be in favor of him coming right back and going right in against Cormier. I would say, give him somebody, some top guy. If he's still Jon Jones, he's going to smoke whoever that is, and then he would get Cormier.
Could you imagine if Daniel Cormier beats Stipe Miocic on July 7th, and Jon Jones comes back? Let's say, best case scenario, he's able to fight the year-end card, let's just say, right? Or January, whatever it is. And he fights Brock Lesnar. And so essentially Cormier is losing out on the two biggest paydays that he can have before he continues to say that he's going to retire come March of next year. The two biggest fights for him, no matter what, win or lose on July 7th, but especially if he wins, Brock Lesnar and Jon Jones. So those are the two fights that he wants. And if Jon Jones comes back, he's now eliminating those two fights from him. How pissed would Cormier be? The good soldier who just beat the heavyweight champion doesn't get to fight the biggest heavyweight contender and doesn't get to fight the biggest light heavyweight contender. And I could kind of see a scenario where that happens, where Jones, you know what I mean? Jones fights Lesnar.
Them's the breaks.
If you own it, when you wrap that belt around your waist, there are certain responsibilities. Now, I live in the fantasy world in which there are certain responsibilities. We know that the UFC is very capable of and often does book fights that have nothing to do with those responsibilities. They book the fights that they think are going to be the biggest selling fights. And so maybe everything that I'm saying is often left field here. But to me, if once you're the champion, it's not up to you to.
But those are legitimately Jon Jones is the second best light heavyweight in the world, right?
He's probably the best light heavyweight in the world.
Exactly. But he doesn't have the belt. I'm saying he's.
But I would have less of a problem with Jon Jones fighting for a title than I would have with Brock Lesnar fighting for a title.
Of course. I'm just saying, retirement fight, he probably wants the biggest fight possible, and those two fights wouldn't be available. Well, we'll see what happens. Yeah. Okay, let's move along. Let's go to the next one. Viewing the recent conversations between Rory and Ben Askren, do you not think this would be a great idea to then platform Askren into the UFC/GSP Khabib, as Rory is a household name, Bellator is known a lot more? So I thought the question was a little bit off, if I'm being honest, but I wanted to use the question as a way to talk about this little back and forth between Askren. I mean, why the hell would Bellator sign Askren to then get him to the UFC? It makes no sense.
Right.
But let's just ignore that part and thank the individual for the question. Askren Rory kind of heating up on Twitter. Yep. Do you see any scenario in which Bellator gets this done? And is it a big deal? Is it a big deal to us nerds? Or do you think that, they should be making fights like this, especially given their recent ratings?
It's funny. You go back and watch on Twitter, and there's a lot of MMA media members who don't like Askren, and they have some good reason to not.
Really?
Not to dislike him.
Such a charming fellow.
Well, he can be a little rough around. He's always been good to me.
Sure.
But I think the MMA media needs to have a reckoning about this one for a little bit, because a lot of y'all hate on him because of his political views.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, are you kidding me?
I don't.
And they'll use that as a starting off point to make an argument about how well he would do. Now, you can have an argument about how well he would do or what he deserves. And you could come to that conclusion if you wanted to and say he would not do well. That's a perfectly reasonable assumption. I'm just saying every time they make that argument, it's also dripping with, oh, and did you see who he's retweeting, or did you see who he is supporting? And to me, it's just like a non-starter. Like, I have diametrically opposed views as him, and I would be very fascinated to see him. Yeah, exactly. I don't care. I don't care at all. Yeah. Now, how competitive would he be? Is Bellator interested? My guess is Bellator's probably not interested because
I was arguing with someone yesterday at Bellator, and they were saying, "Who cares? Who cares?" I'm like, "No, these are the fights that you should be making.
Right.
This is your lineal champion at 170.
Yeah,
you never lost.
Right, exactly. I knew, I had a hunch that Bellator would just not care at all, because if they had cared at this point, it wouldn't be a Rory Twitter beef that they would use. They would have signed him already, or they would have made some kind of overture, and they haven't. So I don't understand why they don't attempt it. It's not like. It's like, what do you have to lose? Don't overpay the guy, I suppose, but what do you have to lose exactly? Right. Rory's, well, I guess he's the champ, so that would be kind of a problem. But nevertheless, this kind of bold experimentation, or Rory goes in there and gives Ben Askren the beatdown, and you could say, again, it really just all depends on your worldview about how valuable he is, what kind of audience you could draw, and what it would all signify. I am highly interested in what Ben Askren could do,
especially against Rory.
Against Rory.
I love that fight.
But mileage varies on this one.
Yeah, I'm also interested in seeing how he would do. I mean, I'm kind of surprised to hear the assessment about how people's like
you
hating
haven't
on the
seen
guy.
That? I've seen that.
I guess I have. I mean, I also would consider myself, the opposite in terms of political views of Ben, but I find him fascinating and interesting all the time. I mean, I think of even like Chael Sonnen as a guy who politically, he and I are totally different worlds, but I still am fascinated by listening to the guy, and so I guess I'm able to get past that with some people at least. I would love to see him come in and fight Rory, but if nothing else, I hope they at least continue their Twitter conversation, because that is extremely interesting. I mean, I thought that Rory's response wasn't like, well, that's just your opinion. And it was almost like the dude and Lebowski. Yeah. That's just your opinion, man.
Well, the interesting
thing I disagree.
The interesting thing is that Askren is still contracted to one. It's not like he's a free agent, so that's a major hurdle as well. But here's Rory MacDonald saying, like, come on, man, at some point, Askren has to stop playing this game. Like, if he really wants to fight these guys, this is his best chance to make a splash towards the end of his career, because he obviously, wants to wrap this up. He's not going to get the GSP fight. It doesn't appear as though there's any interest there. This is his best chance. And I feel like even though there's pushback, I feel like there's an opening there. I feel like, look at the options at 170 right now for Rory. Even though it is one of their better divisions, if not their deepest, there aren't a ton of options for him at 170 that I think are more lucrative or more interesting than Ben Askren. You can make the case that Askren versus Rory is the best non-UFC fight that can be put on right now.
Certainly possible.
Right? I mean, there aren't that many.
You can make the case, yes.
You can make that case. Given their resumes, given their credentials, you can make a very strong case. Plus, if you tell the story honestly of his departure and how it went down, and then what he had to do overseas, and him coming back, and I know they wouldn't do a one-fight deal, because what if he wins and he's going to walk away with the belt? But in a perfect world, you do kind of like this one super fight deal with one. And Scott Coker's been open to sharing, right? He's shared recently with Ryzen, Bama as well. What a great fight! What a great freaking fight!
I just feel like
do that fight in Canada.
Yeah,
it's a big-time fight.
I feel like the major problem here is in MMA, unresolved questions are what drive us. Oh, what would happen if so and so and so and so? But some of those questions you need answered. You have, for the good of the sport, hey, how would Kid Yamamoto do in the UFC? And you didn't get a great answer. It was kind of sad about what happened. But at least we had some attempt, not in his prime exactly.
Exactly.
Okay, but it at least happened.
Sure,
we at least saw him put up the gloves. And because we never got any resolution about that, because that question about Ben's upside or downside went totally unanswered, it leaves this intrigue, and the intrigue is either well placed that he is as good as we think he is, or it's also could be equally well placed that he's bad. It just is frustrating for us, and it leaves this lingering frustration. It's a lesson to promoters: answer these questions if you can. Yeah,
there's only one fight outside of the UFC that I care to see Askren in. I don't care to see him against no-name guys in one. I don't care to see him fight Lima or Koreshkov again. But I would really, really care to see him fight Rory MacDonald. He's the only guy out there that's available to him, in my opinion, at 170 that's interesting.
It has all the ingredients, too. It has the ingredient of, as you pointed out, what does it answer some questions about this one guy who we knew was, he's undefeated. He's a guy that we've seen win, but then kind of disappear off into Asia, where he was fighting guys that many of us didn't even know who they were. So it has that. Then it also has this really excellent fight because he and Rory can put on a great fight. And then the third part of it is, Ben Askren is a guy who can sell a fight too. Yeah. So even if you're just looking at it purely from a commercial standpoint, man, it would be a big. I think it would be a fight that would generate some interest.
Or every Ben Askren skeptic is right, but I would at least like to see it played out.
Yeah.
Here's the truth. Nobody really knows. You can tell yourself all day, oh, he beat this guy, and look at this guy with the takedown defense and won, and certainly any UFC or higher level Bellator fighter would show that wouldn't translate. Maybe that's true, but we really don't know, and I would like to see it answered.
Okay, let's move along to the next one. What else do we have? Any update on the next title fight for the women's flyweight division?
Shevchenko Cachoeira 2, the rematch.
From what I am hearing, Shevchenko Montano in the summertime, maybe even end of July, that card on Fox in Calgary. And so that's the update that I have, although nothing's set. What's the level of interest in that fight?
Wow, close to zero.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Not even to see the coronation of Shevchenko?
Oh, sure. I mean, I guess that would be the one from zero.
Yeah.
No disrespect to her. I have tremendous respect for her as a competitor, but that matchup.
Yeah.
What does it do for me? And not much. No.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel similar. I guess who knows? Maybe we get surprised. But it seems to me going in, it seems to be two fighters at very different levels. And I guess maybe the interesting part of it is that the person who's at the lower level is the one who has the belt. Beyond that, for the coronation aspect of it and what it might lead to. I mean, if we look at if Shevchenko becomes the champion there, might she end up, fighting the former flyweight champion? Strawweight champion, the former strawweight champion. So there might be there might be the what's next, what is this going to lead to kind of interest there. But yeah, I mean, they'd have some work to do to promote that fight.
You know what's weird? Montano won the belt in early December, and she just disappeared. You never see her sitting cage side.
There was that one picture that recently circulated with her.
Oh, I didn't see it.
She had her full, again, I am totally, I'm sure, butchering what was the proper description, but she had full Native American dress on. Okay. And I believe she had her belt with her in some capacity. That's and it was quite a sight, actually. But I don't know what the genesis of this was.
My point is, on Saturday you see O'Malley and Dern sitting cage side. You often see, the MMA celebrities at the pay-per-views. Never seen her once. Haven't seen her do like a big media tour afterwards. The victory lap tour, so to speak. It's almost like she won that belt and she disappeared. Doesn't do a ton of interviews. You don't hear, headlines or see headlines, pertaining to her. So it's kind of been very quiet afterwards. There is kind of an interesting story there because no one thinks that she's good enough to be the champion. No one thinks she's good enough to beat Shevchenko. What if she actually went in there and smoked Shevchenko? That'd be kind of crazy. So that's my intrigue there, but wanted to provide that update. Okay, let's move along to the next question. Do you think Nike or Adidas will be interested in the UFC once the Reebok deal ends? And then there's his thoughts afterwards.
I talked to Joe Lozon about this because Joe has been sort of like an unofficial ambassador, like a liaison for them, and he was like, "Oh yeah, no, when this deal ends, they're done. They're done." Yeah. He didn't say specifically that they had told him that, but that he was pretty clear that the impression he was getting was that when the Reebok deal expires, Reebok has zero intention.
It hasn't gone well for them PR-wise, but the question really is, do you think that the UFC will be able, based on this experience and how it's gone, both kind of financially and PR-wise, to pick up someone else to do this deal?
I don't think any other brand is going to want to get involved until there's a fighters union, because until then you're going to get screamed at. Yeah. I just don't, or unless the deal is somehow incredibly sweetheart deal for the fighters and all the fighters love it. But the reality is, unless the fighters have a direct hand in negotiation, which they can't really in any kind of meaningful capacity without some kind of organizational representative, they're going to get murdered.
Yeah. At the very least, we've learned that it's a lot more complicated than simply signing on the dotted line that we're going to pay this amount of money and we get certain rights. What has Reebok gotten out of it? It's a lot of grief to some extent, really. I mean, and so another apparel company is going to think, okay, is this something that's worthwhile for us? Now I don't know if we can still call them the new ownership of the UFC. It's not really new new yet, but the ownership, I think, is it's a different entity that is probably a little bit more far-reaching, I guess, in terms of working with these kinds of sponsors. Maybe there are some connections with some other with the Adidas or the Nike or other companies. I mean, somebody's going to outfit the fighters, right? They're going to have something. I mean,
they could go back to the old days.
It's hard for me to imagine them reversing course. I mean, I imagine they'll have to generate something, but if I were one of the companies, whether it be if I was an executive at Reebok or an executive at one of those other companies, I would definitely be treading lightly, and I would be probably trying to talk to fighters and get a sense, even though they're not going to be the ones who are going to have the final say. It's going to be the UFC management. I still think you're going to have to it's just too much of a PR hit if you don't have the fighters, or at least some significant fighters on your side.
Worth noting as well that Reebok and Adidas are owned by the same parent company, so you'd have to think that they've been sharing
Adidas
notes.
Adidas is involved in the combat sports space on the side a little bit, and their gear is actually tremendous. But I mean, do they really want to?
What's the upside?
I would be very, very surprised by that.
All right.
By the way, did you see? Sorry about that. I didn't mean to interrupt. Did you see Daniel Cormier? I didn't realize he did this before UFC 220. You know that thing on Complex where they take you sneaker shopping?
Yeah.
Did you see that with him?
I did, yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize. I didn't see it till today.
Yeah.
And he was talking about who could have a shoe in the MMA. And he was like, only Conor McGregor could have a shoe, but it had to be like a.
You just said in the MMA, by the way.
Did I?
Yeah, in the MMA.
Dude, I'm rusty.
Man,
rusty.
in the MMA.
Rusty.
Dang.
What are you gonna do, bro?
All right.
I'm like Rich Eisen.
Thoughts on Mike Perry versus Yancy Medeiros? You mentioned during the show you don't like this fight, Luke.
Well, so the thing about this one is, everyone right now is on like this. Lathering themselves up in the soap of violence. They just can't wait to shower.
Wait a second. What? Is violence a bad thing?
No, it's great.
Okay.
Here's the problem. It's fine, other than Perry is a guy that there's, and Medeiros too as well, but Perry is coming off that. Perry's been a guy who's 26 years old, and he had I think it was Mike Chip, I know he had like 7 fights in the last year or something, right? Because he had gone from the regional scene and then on up. And he's a guy that you have pegged, and I don't want to say it's not true for Medeiros, but let's just focus on Perry, that had upside. You could say, this guy's getting better, man. Like, you watch how he fought on the regional scene, and now he fought in the UFC. He has made strides, but he's taken these tough fights over and over and over again. These really hard fights, too. And he's taken a beating, and there's not enough space in between for him to get the development. I actually do think highly of Mike Perry, and I would like to see him maximize his potential. I'm not his coach. I'm not in an educated enough position to say he's not doing it, but I am a little bit concerned that these fights are happening within quick succession enough to limit his technical development.
Yep.
I actually am kind of high on Medeiros. I mean, he's the guy that I think has shown.
Contrarian.
I think he's the one that to me has shown. I don't know, maybe a sophisticated palette of
despite the last fight.
Well, the last fight wasn't great for him.
He still has tricks. He has a lot of interesting tricks.
He can. So I mean, I guess these are both guys that I think have. I don't know that these guys have reached their ceiling. I'm not sure whether having them clash at this moment is going to push one of them through that ceiling to a higher level, or whether it's going to beat them both down. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I'm not hating on this fight by any means. It's certainly going to be an interesting night.
People seem to be excited when it was announced. I'm sure it'll be a fun fight. My immediate reaction was twofold. A, as you said, it seems like it's way too soon for Mike Perry. Like, I was under the impression that he was going to take some time off, maybe figure out his coaching situation, maybe try some new things, evolve. And like you said, he's been fighting a lot, and he just fought in February, so it'll be 5 months between fights. That just doesn't seem like all that much. And also, who's better right now? Who's more accomplished, Yancy Medeiros or Max Griffin?
Yancy?
Yeah, it's a step up. It's a step up after your like, to me, you should be taking a step back, build yourself back up, not take a step up. Right. And so, I don't know, a little concern there. But we'll see, 226, like 225, at least right now, turning out to be a good one. Okay, let's move along. As journalists, we're taught that there are no bad questions, but that's not always true. Is there a question you regret asking to an MMA personality? So the reason I chose this one is I think it's a very good question. It's an interesting one. You may not have one that comes to mind, but also, and we don't have a ton of time, there was a fascinating story that played out yesterday in the NBA where a very good reporter named Ali LaForce asked LeBron James a question about the passing of Greg Popovich's wife after the Cavaliers beat the Pacers, and she received a lot of flack for this. People said it wasn't the right time, the right question to ask. LeBron came to her defense. So it kind of reminded me of that situation as well. At times you ask questions that maybe you regret. And so I wanted to know if you guys regret it, or if you wanted to talk about yesterday's situation where, you know, sometimes you have to, you know, balance, is this a question I want to ask, but is this not the right time? You know, it's always a tricky thing sometimes. Is there one that comes to mind?
I don't have a personal, you know, question where I thought, oh man, I can't believe I asked that. But on the topic you just brought up, I think that the media in a kind of a larger way has constructed all of these little scenarios where we're supposed to get access to athletes, and these are things that it used to be that you would watch a game on TV, and then when the game was over, reporters would go into the locker room and ask the athletes how it went, and that was pretty much it. But now we've got, you know, when they're walking off the field at halftime, and there's sideline reporters, and there's always this. It always seems to me that there's like this idea that we're supposed to get some kind of great insight as an athlete is in the middle of competing, and I just don't find that to be all that compelling. I find that it's almost always either going to be intrusive, as the LeBron situation has been portrayed, which I actually don't share that. I feel like asking somebody their reaction about the death of somebody who they care about is not a bad thing necessarily, but it did kind of, you know, resonate badly with people. But what was the alternative? She could have asked a question about the game that would have elicited LeBron's standard, you know, well, he's got, you know, 3 answers that he always gives during these halftime or end of game, you know, little quick interviews, and he would have just like gone into his old, like, you know, filing cabinet and pulled out answer number 3 and just issue it just like he issued it last week to somebody else. So I feel like those are kind of no-win situations regardless of who you are. There are very few people who can ask those kinds of things and do it successfully.
I've asked a lot of stupid questions in my life, which I got dumb answers. I've asked a lot of questions that had no value, but I don't regret any of that. I don't regret asking Jon that question at that press conference. Was it 214?
That wasn't a bad question, though.
No, but I'm saying, even experientially, I don't regret it. In fact, my only regret to answer the question with anything is that I've probably not asked enough questions, to be quite frank. Now, the one about yesterday I thought was a little bit borderline. You know, it's like, hey, LeBron, why were you doing the pick and roll with the perimeter problems? Also, what's up with this lady's death? It's like, it was a little bit shoehorned in there in a way that maybe it shouldn't have been. So that's a little bit different scenario. But I actually, you know, you're one of the better ones at this in this job, maybe the best one at this. I have a hard time doing this job, dude. I have a hard time doing this job because for me, yes, I have a talent for pissing off people, even when I don't attempt to. It just is a natural course of action.
Yes, you do.
More so than it's true. Like, even when I'm not even trying to piss somebody off, I'll say something and they get bitter about it. And I'm like, I'm not even sure. I have to sit there and dissect, like, what is it they could possibly be bitter about? But it's just the way of the world, and you have to accept it. But the reality is, it's not that I ever shield myself from questions, but I have found that if I ask somebody probing questions, they stop talking, to me anyway. And so then I lose them. And so now I'm in this position where I'm like, I don't want to not ask the questions that I want to ask, and I don't want to not give the analysis that I think the audience deserves. But how do you do that? And I don't mind blowing up certain relationships, you know, and like, oh, a certain fighter won't talk to you ever again. Okay. I mean, I believe me, I'm not going to lose sleep over that overnight. But if all of them do that, well, then you have a bit of a problem. And I don't want to also put myself in a position where I feel like nobody understands what I'm trying to say. In any case, so if I have regrets, it's that I have and I'll be candid, I have a very hard time navigating a space where I can ask questions I care about and be able to ask that person questions also down the line that I care about. And I struggle with trying to figure out how to do that.
I thought the most interesting, and I appreciate the candid answer, I thought the most interesting part of yesterday's debate after the LeBron, Ali LaForce interview, which that stuff fascinates me. Like, I could listen to a whole podcast just on that, you know, like, I love that topic, right? was that it exemplified the worst of social media and the worst of Twitter, because within seconds, and again, like, I think she's one of the best at that job, and it's a very tough job. I mean, at times, you know, like you said, like you're trying to do something special when you're not, you know, you're giving these cliche answers and you're getting shoehorned into situations, but instantaneously, everyone's calling for her job, right? Everyone's saying you should be fired, you're a scumbag.
It drives me crazy.
And then it comes out that she actually asked him beforehand. Not only did she ask him, she told him the news and then asked him, "Are you okay with me asking?" So I mean, at that point, he could have said no, and yet everyone's, you know, calling for her job. And this happens time and again, where you get these Twitter mobs. And I love Twitter. I mean, I'm on it all day. We're on Twitter right now. It's great. But you get this reaction where people are calling for you to get fired over a question. That to me sort of exemplified the worst of social media, because she didn't deserve that. Even if it was a bad question, even if she told it, you know, on the spot and he didn't know and it was in poor taste and it was classless, you don't deserve to lose your job. You know, you don't deserve to lose 10 years of experience just, you know.
She wasn't asking about LeBron's sex life or something, which would be, you know, just totally abhorrent line of questioning.
Yeah. I would just say, it's one thing that I certainly see in the interviews that you do on the hour every week, and one thing that I've always thought about whenever I've done interviews, it's not so much about the words that come out of my mouth as an interviewer, it's about what goes in my ear, and that it seems kind of you know, obvious, but a lot of people don't recognize that if you're an interviewer and you're not listening, then you're not going to get anywhere. And it's all, and because I guess when you know, I said I couldn't point to any regrets, but I do remember there was some time, and I don't remember who I was interviewing, but I was really thinking about what I was going to ask next, and I threw out a question that basically the person sort of looked at me like, well, I kind of just talked about that. And it was really a good lesson. It was, you know, when I was a lot younger, and I don't remember now who it was, maybe a politician when I was doing some political stuff, and it's really important that it's not about the words, it's the words coming in.
That's the number one rule.
Yeah.
Whenever people ask me for advice, listen. You have to listen. Don't have questions written down. Treat it as a conversation. Listen and ask follow-ups. Because if you go in there with a set of questions, you're not going to listen. Someone may drop something in their last word of an answer, and you completely drive by it because you already have your next question queued up.
Last thing on this, we're also living in an age of incredible media antipathy. You know, we live in this weird age where you can be a media star, but at the same time, there's this incredible media antipathy. And to be very clear, there's a lot of problems with modern media on the corporate side, even on the nonprofit side, on the political side, on the sports side. Like, I am very open to the idea that we could be doing this a lot better. But I also find a lot of that criticism and a lot of that heat comes from people who have no capacity to be engaged in this discussion whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like, what do they know about how an actual media institution functions, how it should function, where it's failing, operationally, editorially? You're not qualified to have this discussion. If you don't like what they put out, that's a completely different question about whether it's inappropriate or unfair. And I thought what she did was borderline, but worthy of termination of her employment? I mean, this is absurd.
Crazy. Okay, let's go rapid fire here before we have to say goodbye. Why has McGregor not been suspended or punished by the UFC yet? The question for me here is, are you surprised he hasn't been punished or suspended?
No.
Okay, all right, just wanted to make sure.
No, the question is not why hasn't he. The question is they can do nothing.
Yeah.
They can do, you'll do nothing. That thing?
Yeah.
He's right.
Yeah.
You can't do anything to him without severely financially imperiling yourself.
Yeah.
So, you know, why haven't you cut off your arm? Because that would be bad?
Yeah.
Like,
right? There's no there.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move along to left. If you had to swap places with anyone specific in sports media for a day, who would you pick?
Oh.
One day.
If I had to swap places?
Yes.
I would swap with either Amin Al-Hassan, Pablo Torre, or Dan Le Batard.
Interesting.
3 of my favorites.
You got to pick one.
I got to pick one. I'll go with Dan Le Batard.
Because the interesting thing about that answer is they all do very different things.
They do. But they're part of I think Dan Le Batard has the best radio show in sports.
Interesting.
My personal opinion.
Yeah.
Mileage will vary.
Yep.
And the cast of characters he has around them are interesting and fun and different. Amin being one of them. Pablo being another. Israel Gutierrez is another one. You could go down the list.
Bomani Jones?
Bomani Jones. I'm not a big fan of Bomani, to be quite honest. I thought to me, his whole Kirk Cousins analysis was bankrupt from day one. But
former SB Nation employee.
I understand, but I thought he had incredibly poor analysis of that whole situation. In any case, but Pablo I like. So I would pick Dan Le Batard because I think what he's doing in sports is totally novel, and I'd like to dabble in it for a day.
Okay, that's cool.
I'm not really sure. I guess I'll go with my ESPN colleague Stephen A. I mean, I want to be. I would like to be able to get that. I would like to be able to raise my voice because I'm always fascinated. I mean, I used to kind of dislike this guy, but I watch him on wherever he is. He always is just so on. He's the guy never ever has a quiet, reflective moment. It is always just blustering, and I used to kind of hate that, but now I kind of respect it. I think it's pretty amazing that someone can actually do that always.
I'm gonna change my answer to Skip Bayless.
Skip Bayless.
I have come.
Wait, you want no one to watch you?
Hold on. I have come to respect his genius.
Okay.
And I absolutely mean this. Hold on. I absolutely mean this. Here's what everyone says. Skip Bayless, you mean the guy who says idiotic things? Yeah, he says the dumbest things on earth. Like literally no one says dumber things than him, okay? He has far and away the dumbest things. But you know what the insight is that he has? Is that all these like writers out there, and I see it all the time, they try to outthink the other one, and they're all giving these moderately intelligent takes, but nothing groundbreaking. You won't remember their work. When they don't have a byline anymore, it will all just fade into the ocean of Google, and it will just drop to the bottom. When you die, you think you're gonna take your moderately intelligent takes with you? You will take nothing. You will be forgotten, you will be a nobody, and that includes me too, by the way. Skip Bayless understands that. It's like, you know what? I might as well just be a circus animal and get paid. You can say all you want about how am I going to pay the rent with these super bright takes while Skip Bayless is in there with umbrellas in his drink, with a pool in his backyard, and not having to worry about anything. He has financial security for life because he knows this whole charade we're doing is just that. So I kind of respect that about Skip Bayless.
Wow, so that's your pick?
That is my pick.
Dang. So
Skip Bayless.
How about this? You went with Skip, he went with Stephen A.
Yeah, we should have a show.
Yeah, really.
Yell at each other.
Where's Max? You want to be?
I'll
be Max?
say Doris
Wait,
Burke.
does that make you Molly Karam?
Yeah, sure. Molly Karam's the best. I love Molly Karam. Way prettier than I am. Doris Burke. Love Doris Burke.
Yes.
But I would love Mike Breen to say, let's send it over to Ariel Helwani, who's standing by with LeBron as he's walking off Game 4 of the NBA Finals. Yeah. That would be awesome.
The Knicks should give you like a one-day job.
That would be cool. Or the Jazz.
Or the Jazz.
Yeah, my new favorite team. Okay, last one. What do we got? Best live concert you have ever attended?
Ooh, wow, that's a good question. Best live concert I've ever attended.
Oh, I think Jeff's got one.
Springsteen, of course. I mean, there's nobody.
You've attended like a million Springsteen. You got to pick one. Best live concert.
Maybe the. The first time I ever saw Springsteen, maybe was a long, long time ago, and I was so desperate to see that. I sat in basically paid like ridiculous amount of money to get like front row seats, and since then I've not done that. But it was yeah, but I have to say Springsteen back in the day.
Where?
In Boston.
Garden?
No, it was before he was playing the Garden. It was back when he was playing like what was now called the Wang Center. Back then was called the Music Hall, and it was basically between his Born to Run and his next album. So it was when he was just becoming like the superstar, and he wasn't playing arenas, he wasn't playing stadiums, he was playing theaters, and it was just the most there was just nothing like it. It was just the most dynamic performance I could ever imagine.
Best frontman I've ever seen was Phil Anselmo, the former lead singer for Pantera, when he played with Down. I saw Down open for I think Anthrax at the Fillmore in Spring.
Anthrax? Is that the name of a band?
Oh my God. Are you serious?
Even I know
I'm
that.
not even a big Anthrax guy, and I was, Jesus Christ.
Louise.
Okay, but Phil Anselmo was the best frontman I've ever seen, but the best concert, anyone who was my age who grew up in the D.C. area will know that WHFS was one of these. You remember when rock stations were like the big rock stations?
Yeah. So
the two big ones were DC 101 and WHFS. Howard Stern got his start at DC 101, which was featured in that movie. The rival station was WHFS. When I moved to DC from New York, it flipped to all Spanish. But before that, in 2000, every year they used to have the biggest concerts, and it was called the HF Festival. And I went in 2000 when I was still in college, and it was, I mean, all kinds of bands you could name, but the top of the tier, and I'm dating myself, but I'm just telling you how good it was Cypress Hill, Stone Temple Pilots, and then the headlining act was Rage Against the Machine, and it was raining when they played. It was, I mean, truly one of the most phenomenal shows I've ever seen. Outdoors. It was at FedEx Field.
Oh, wow.
It was at FedEx Field. So, I mean, I've seen some death metal bands in smaller venues, but Rage Against the Machine, I mean, they brought the house down. It was incredible.
I'd like to see them.
That was right after the Evil Empire album came out.
I was. I would also say an outdoor one. I went to one at Jerry Park in Montreal. I don't remember who was the headliner, but Public Enemy, Wu-Tang, Cannabis, Eminem. It was like this festival outdoors.
Cannabis?
Yeah, Cannabis was the man.
Was this before LL Cool J wrecked
him? This was when he came out with that song about LL, second round
4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah.
But
I'm more in favor of cannabis over anthrax as a substance.
That was outdoors as well, and it was raining. But I'll give you one more. In 2004, my brother and I went to a quote unquote concert, but it didn't really feel like one in a I don't know, a lounge in New York City. The headliner was John Legend. There may not have been more than 1,000 people there. I'm being very, very kind, very generous, 1,000. You know who the opener was? 2004, New York City, less than 1,000 people. John Legend, headliner, opener, Kanye West.
No way.
Yes, after one, it just came out with his first album.
So my buddy is friends, his wife is friends with the guy who manages Kanye's tours. And so they get free tickets whenever he gets to go to town. They get to hang out with him backstage. He said he went backstage and it was a who's who of all the rappers that you could ever imagine, including, and he got all the pictures, including one of my favorite rappers of all time, Pusha T.
Okay.
I just want to point that out. So
you weren't there.
No, in fact, he was like, I did. He goes, I was going to ask you. I didn't think you liked Kanye, which I don't. But had I known Pusha T was going to be there, I would have gone.
All right.
There you go.
Okay.
Good stuff.
So there you have it. Good reminiscing there.
Tom Waits, another great one.
Who's that? Just joking. Okay, we are out of time. Thank you very much to everyone who sent in questions. Appreciate everyone who tuned in today. Another fun show in the books. We'll be back next week. Of course, UFC back this weekend. Their first show at the Boardwalk Hall in Atlantic City in 13 years. Kevin Lee versus Edson Barbosa. Frankie Edgar returning on very short notice against Cub Swanson.
It's a good card.
It is a good card. It is a good card. There's a lot to like there. So we'll talk about that and, of course, a hell of a lot more. For now, we shall say goodbye for the rest of the crew. For Luke, for Jeff, I am Ariel. Again, thanks so much for watching. Enjoy your weekend and enjoy the fights.